Pedophile Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. So why do we still know nothing about him? Well, we're finding out tonight some answers. The Wall Street Journal just got its hands on Jeffrey Epstein's private calendar, and it was a lot more suspicious than Brett Kavanaugh's. Epstein was meeting with the kind of people you'd think would steer clear of a convicted pedophile. Jeffrey Epstein was meeting with one of Barack Obama's top lawyers, Catherine Rumler. She met with Epstein dozens of times. Epstein even tried to set up Obama's lawyer to work for Bill Gates. How is Jeffrey Epstein a fixer between Obama's lawyer and Bill Gates? Epstein was also meeting with Joe Biden's CIA director. He wasn't CIA director at the time. He was Barack Obama's deputy secretary of state. William Burns was working for John Kerry at the State Department and meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, a known pedophile. And then Burns becomes CIA director. Today's director of the CIA went to Epstein's Manhattan townhouse where Epstein had sex with underage girls and, where he filmed other men having sex with underage girls. And William Burns went there and was then promoted to the director of the CIA. Now, I wonder if the future CIA director saw the portrait of Bill Clinton in a blue dress hanging in Epstein's parlor room. A few years later, Epstein was arrested and then hung himself in a jail cell while security cameras just happened to not be working and the replacement guards just happened to fall asleep. And 2 years later, Biden just happens to pick William Burns to run the CIA. So what are we supposed to think? It's never been more clear. Epstein was an intelligence asset. Not only was he working for the CIA, Israeli intelligence, maybe even Russia intelligence. So was the American government allowing an asset to traffic and molest teenage girls all over the world for intelligence? Were we allowing Epstein to commit crimes against children for blackmail material? Well, we asked the CIA director, William Burns, why were you meeting with a convicted pedophile at his disgusting townhouse? And the CIA director said this: the director did not know anything about him, other than that he was introduced as an expert in the financial services sector and offered general advice on transition to the private sector. They had no relationship. So Obama's State Department official couldn't have asked anybody else in the entire country for help with a job in finance? He could have called any CEO, any hedge fund manager, any banking director. But he meets with Jeffrey Epstein, a guy that doesn't even really have a real business, a guy that doesn't even have a website, a guy that, as far as we know, only had one client, the CEO of Victoria's Secret. That doesn't add up, Burnsy. And this explains the sweetheart deal back in 2006. This explains the prison cell cover-up. And this explains why all the Epstein tapes went missing. Everything Epstein recorded, everything, missing. Every property he owned. But when he died, the Fed seized all the tapes, and the only person who's ever been arrested since then was the Madam, Maxwell.
Jeffrey Epstein found me almost immediately. He knew exactly where I was, the location. And I knew then that I was being filmed. I was being watched 24/7. There were cameras all over the island.
So the CIA has all the sex tapes, and they've been blackmailing like crazy. This is the blackmail jackpot. Hours of video starring the world's most important people in Epstein Island, in the Manhattan townhouse, and the Palm Beach estate, and the New Mexico ranch. Bill Clinton was good pals with Jeffrey. Flew on the Lolita Express 26 times, went to his private island. So when someone does something that doesn't make any sense, maybe it's because they don't want to be doing what they're doing. Maybe it's because someone's telling them what to do and threatening to release the tapes if they don't.
Justice has issued a report on the death of Jeffrey Epstein. The report lays out in detail what it says are failures that occurred starting a month before Epstein died by suicide at the Metropolitan Correctional Center here in Manhattan. Among its findings, the DOJ says there were numerous and serious failures by the correctional staff, including failing to ensure that Epstein was assigned a cellmate. The report also says that the staff failed to undertake required measures designed to ensure that Epstein was accounted for and safe. It also clearly states that Epstein did die from hanging by a noose he fashioned from a sheet or shirt, and there is no evidence contradicting the FBI's finding that there was no criminal activity associated with Epstein's
Inspector
death.
General revealing new details on the death of Jeffrey Epstein. The DOJ watchdog blames the disgraced financier's suicide in a Manhattan jail on guard negligence and misconduct. Among other things, the report alleges the congressional staff failed to ensure Epstein was assigned a cellmate and failed to take other required measures to ensure he was safe and accounted for. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky is here with more on this. Aaron, there's still so many questions swirling about how a prisoner this high profile, having already been on suicide watch, was able to take his own life. So what more is this report saying about that?
There was no more high-profile federal inmate at the time than Jeffrey Epstein. And Diane, this report from the Justice Department's Inspector General is scathing in its assessment of the Bureau of Prisons and the Manhattan Correctional Facility, which has since been shuttered after the death of Jeffrey Epstein. And the report leaves no doubt that Epstein died by suicide. His death has always been the subject of conspiracy theory and guesswork, but this report makes clear Epstein took his own life. There was no one else in the cell at the time, no one even around his cell at the time, and that is meant to put to rest any doubts that may still be lingering. And for the first time, we're seeing the mechanism by which Epstein was able to take his own life. An orange noose fashioned from either a shirt or a sheet. We see the images of it found in his cell along with other excess prison items like blankets and clothing that should not have been in the cell. But that's the least of it. You're right, Diane. The report also takes aim at how the Bureau of Prisons conducted itself with regard to Epstein. He had tried suicide a month prior, and after that, he was supposed to have a cellmate, and he did not, and he was supposed to be checked every 30 minutes. The guards instead made the logbooks look like they had completed their rounds when, in fact, in reality, they hadn't.
Now, Aaron, despite citing multiple failures by the correctional facility, the report also supports the FBI's determination that there was no criminality associated with Epstein's death. Can you explain how they found one and not the other?
Well, there were a number of failings, but they didn't amount to criminal failings. In fact, two people did get brought up on federal charges, the two guards who were supposed to be checking in on Epstein's cell every 30 minutes. Instead, they were shopping online or doing anything but checking on his cell, but yet they doctored the logbooks to make it look like they had completed their rounds. Both of those guards resolved their cases through a deferred prosecution agreement and had to admit to the conduct as charged. But none of the other failings that the report cites, including the failure to give him a roommate and the like, none of that amounted to crimes that could be charged by federal prosecutors.
So, Aaron, what's the latest from corrections officials on all of this? What are they saying?
Well, they've tried to address some of these shortcomings when it comes to staffing and the like, but MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, that's just behind the building where I am now, that has been shut down, and there's no prospect that it's going to reopen. And in fact, it's really put a burden on other lockups in the area and made it more difficult to get inmates who need to be housed there into federal court. So federal prosecutors would like that facility to reopen, but at the moment, the conditions that were laid bare by Epstein's suicide, they're just so bad that the Bureau of Prisons has not been able to reopen that facility even all these years later.
All right, Aaron Katursky, always great to have you on, Aaron.
A new report is out detailing the failures in a New York jail that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to kill himself in 2019. The Department of Justice said the Bureau of Prisons failed by not having prison employees conduct rounds to check on Epstein, allowing Epstein access to extra linens, which he used to hang himself and not assigning Epstein a cellmate after he was placed on suicide watch. Like the FBI's investigation, the report did not find anything criminal in Epstein's death. Joining us live now with more on this is Cara Scannell. Cara, what more do we know about this?
Yeah, so this report, 128 pages, real scathing rebuke of the Bureau of Prison staff who were responsible for ensuring Jeffrey Epstein's safety while he was awaiting trial. Now, the couple of things that you mentioned are some of the big headlines here of what they missed. I mean, beginning in late July, remember Epstein had hung himself on August 10th of 2019, but as early as late July, Epstein was found lying on the floor of his cell with an orange cloth around his neck. He was then determined by the psychiatric ward to have a cellmate, and that didn't happen. So then leading up to the night that Epstein had killed himself, he did not have a cellmate. Another shortcoming is that he was allowed to stockpile bed linen. I think we have a photo of that. You just see how many orange bed linens he had in his cell, and that is what he was able to use to fasten nooses, which were recovered in his cell when they found his body in the early mornings of August 10th. These guards were supposed to do reviews, prisoner checks every 30 minutes, that because he was in the special housing unit known as the SHU. But the report found that between 10:40 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., they did no checks at all. So that gave Epstein ample time, because he had no cellmate, he had the means and the opportunity to commit suicide. Now, one of the things that came out of this was there were a lot of conspiracy theories of whether Epstein could have been murdered. Even his own legal team had put forward a medical expert who said he thought it was potential for homicide. So what this report does is also gets into saying that they found no criminality. They said that there was of the video that was available, which there were also deficiencies in that, there was no evidence or no images of anyone entering the area of the SHU where he was. They also found that there was no defensive wounds, nothing under his fingernails, no bruises, no contusions on his body, nothing to show that he was fighting off any assailant. Trying to put to rest some of the big question there, was there anything else that could have happened? But the bottom line here is they're saying that all of these shortcomings not only allowed Epstein to die, not only allowed these questions around his death to happen, but also deprived his numerous victims of any justice, because he could never go to trial to face these charges. Zane?